Every empire is built on belief, not on gold, not on armies, but on the faith that tomorrow the paper in your hand will still mean something. For a century, that paper was the dollar, the world's currency, the promise of safety, the symbol of an empire that outlasted kings, wars, and ideologies. But what happens when the world stops believing? What happens when the money that ruled the world dies? This is the story of the day the dollar dies, a story written not in numbers, but in faith, power, and illusion. The world lies in ruins, but in a small town called Bretton Woods, a new order is born. While Europe still smolders, men in suits decide the future of money. They choose the US dollar as the new sun around which all other currencies will orbit. And to guarantee trust, they promise every dollar will be backed by gold. It was the birth of a perfect illusion, a currency that seemed as solid as metal, but was built on something invisible: trust. After the war, the United States held 70% of the world's gold. Nations rebuilt with American dollars. From Germany to Japan, prosperity began to speak English. The dollar was not just paper. It was power, culture, Hollywood, Coca-Cola, and armies. It became the flag of the modern age. But every belief begins with a seed of doubt, and every monetary empire with its first lie. Because gold can't be printed, but trust can. And soon, they would print both. By the early 1970s, the Bretton Woods promise began to crack. America was spending more than it owned on wars, consumption, and credit. Gold drained from its vaults, and the world began to see the truth. The United States was printing faith, not wealth. In 1971, Richard Nixon appeared on television. With a cold, measured tone, he announced the unthinkable. "I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold." Temporarily, a word that would last forever. The gold standard died that night, but empires don't collapse, they adapt. As gold disappeared, another metal took its place: oil. Behind closed doors, a pact was born between Washington and Riyadh. The United States would protect Saudi Arabia militarily, and in return, oil would be sold only in US dollars. Gold no longer backed the dollar, but oil did. The Petrodollar was born, the alchemy of the 20th century. Every gallon burned, every war fought, every factory powered became a silent tribute to the dollar. The rest of the world didn't see the coup because it came not with tanks, but with contracts. It was the most elegant coup in modern history. Gold was gone, but faith remained. And now that faith was tied to the most volatile thing on earth: the fear of running out of energy. The dollar no longer needed gold. It had something stronger: dependency. An empire without gold needed something else to feed on. It found it in debt. By the 1980s, America discovered its greatest power: to print credit and export inflation. The United States could spend endlessly because the world needed dollars to survive. The system was simple, almost genius. Washington issued debt, the world bought it, and the cycle of faith spun endlessly. Factories in Asia, oil in Arabia, IMF loans, everything flowed back to the same vaults: America's. The more the world prospered, the more debt the empire created. The dollar was no longer a currency. It was a drug, and the entire planet was addicted. Families lived on credit, corporations lived on credit, governments lived on credit. And the more they printed, the stronger the illusion became, because no one wanted to be the first to wake from the dream. But machines never sleep, and every debt machine has a breaking point. In 2008, faith shook. Banks collapsed, markets crashed, panic spread. The empire almost fell, saved only by more of the same: debt to cover debt. A golden patch on a fabric that could no longer hold history's weight. They didn't fix the system. They just made it bigger. And now, the cracks began to show. Every empire begins to fall from within, first through arrogance, then through denial. From Vietnam to the oil crisis, from the dot-com crash to 2008, each disaster whispered the same truth. The empire of the dollar is mortal. But instead of retreating, America doubled down. More stimulus, more credit, more printing. Faith, not gold, had become the foundation. And faith is the most fragile commodity of all. For decades, the dollar was the mirror of global stability. But now, that reflection was starting to warp. People felt it, the world saw it, and new empires waited their turn. While the West printed promises, the East printed plans. China watched, silent, patient, ancient. While Washington exported inflation, Beijing exported infrastructure. While the U.S. sanctioned, China connected. Ports, railways, fiber optic cables, the new Silk Road. At its core, a new weapon was born, the Digital Yuan. No SWIFT, no Wall Street banks, a system that spoke directly to power. Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, nations tired of paying tribute in dollars. A new idea took shape, trade beyond the empire. And with it, the first real tremor in dollar hegemony. Global faith began to split. The dollar still reigned, but its throne was cracking. At first, no one believed it, not when interest rates spiked, not when nations began dumping U.S. bonds, not even when oil was priced for the first time in another currency. Investors fled, markets plummeted, governments held emergency meetings. The death of a currency is never one event. It is a chain of denials, a slow erosion of faith, a civilization realizing that its safe paper isn't safe at all. When the dollar dies, there are no explosions, no soldiers in the streets, only silence and fear. People lined up at banks, borders tightened, news anchors repeated one word: default. The empire didn't fall because it lost its armies, but because it lost its credit. And without credit, even the mightiest empire becomes just another chapter in history. After collapse comes silence, and then the questions. What replaces lost faith? Another currency? Another empire? Or something entirely new? Belief in people, not paper. The world rebuilt, not because it found a new dollar, but because it remembered for a fleeting moment that money is only a story we agreed to believe, and stories change. Gold, oil, debt. None of them ever ruled the world. Only faith did. Empires don't fall when enemies arrive. They fall when belief disappears. The day the dollar dies is not a date on a calendar. It's the day humanity realizes that trust, not paper, was always the true reserve of value. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And this time, you're inside the rhyme. Subscribe. History has the answers.